Excellent. So, Mr. Rob Hedges, wonderful to be talking again. It was many years ago when we first encountered each other in the land of NewsUK. But great to have you on this call, and it's going to be a wonderful discussion around your full archetype profile. We call it the full archetype spectrum because there are 6 different characters in this profile that we're going to be exploring. But you did your power profile to start with. You've seen a little bit of a result on that, but now we're going to go deeper and look at the other characters and how they balance out, because it's really important to understand that. Would be wonderful to start, though, just to have a little bit of an understanding of who you are, maybe a bit about what you've done over your few years on this planet, and maybe where you are and what you're seeing in the future as well, because it's always good to kind of do these in the light of what's coming up for you right now.
Cool. Yes, I suppose I've been in publishing man and boy. So 23 years working for News International and NewsUK. Incredible period to be in media. So much change, so much of it documented so well. But we went from just being ink and paper to this strange concept called the internet coming along, and then that went away again and then came back. But over that time, the change that I've seen and enjoyed, I suppose, within the industry, and it's not the only industry affected by it, obviously, by this disruption, has been monumental. I remember thinking that I was working on the Sunday Times paywall launch 10 years ago, and this was the spotlight was on us. This was the big change in the industry, and at the time that we were doing that, this other weird thing, this little box arrived in the building which contained an iPad, and it was just like, well, what's that? And all of a sudden it was just like, okay, so we've got this change here and this is coming along, and since then the speed of change has only got faster, and I think that is why I love the industry itself. But I think across the board, everyone is facing that kind of thing. Really, it's a case of whenever you think is the status quo, well, forget about it. It's going to be gone in 20 seconds. So in the taking change to the theme, I'm now going through my own change. I've now left full-time employment, and I've set up myself, and want to use that experience of those changes that I've gone through and mainly successfully met, I think, to help others deal with the same issues, the same problems, and the new ones that will come down the line.
Yeah. So essentially, you're now positioned as a business consultant. Is that a correct term? Is that the best way to describe you right now?
That will do. Nice and amorphous. Yeah, absolutely. That works.
Excellent. And I know that you've been involved in all kinds of projects, all kinds of different areas of business in the past. And so I take it you're kind of bringing that with your digital knowledge, your communication knowledge, your understanding of teams and those dynamics. All of that kind of comes into your bag now and helping people to move forward, understand. It's all sorts of areas of business consultation that can take place. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Sums it up perfectly. I will quote you on that going forward.
Okay. Use the video. Take that snippet. Excellent. So do you remember you did you've only fairly recently come across this whole TeamMe app, the archetype profiling mechanic. And do you remember what the first that it highlighted in the TeamMe.app takes you through to that power profile when you fill in just your 30 questions? Should take about 90 seconds to get through that, and you're presented then with 2 key sort of leading characters. So to understand yourself from the point of view of these archetypal characters, the sort of characters that you see in movies and classic books and literature, they're kind of fairly flat characters in the sense that what you get, what the king is, what the warrior is, what the mystic is. They don't really need a lot of explanation. Everybody gets this, and that's actually where the power of this thing's at. So it would have given you 2 primary characters. Do you remember what they were in order as well?
So in order, I think primarily I was a sage, and followed closely on its heels by the mystic.
Right, excellent. So they show you your kind of driving characters. It doesn't really give you a sense of whether they're absolutely neck and neck or whether one's just slightly behind the other, but it always presents them, slightly behind or a long way behind. But it usually then gives people a real sense of, yeah, that's kind of the way I approach life, is these two characters. Sometimes they can be somewhat contradictory, which is really interesting. For example, the sage and the lover, where you've got the sage will go in with that looking at evidence and knowledge. So we'll unpack what that means for you, basing things upon evidence and facts. I want to know what's real here out of the situation. But then sometimes that can be taken to such an extreme where you've got a Sherlock Holmes type of character who really doesn't get the people side of thing at all. He's so based on facts and evidence that emotions just don't come into it. He regards emotions as being, a fog. It's just like, well, that's superfluous to what we're dealing with here. This is an investigation. We're looking at facts. And yet what we'll come to see with your profile is actually that the lover actually is pretty strong. So you are, unlike Sherlock Holmes, actually quite able to connect with people. But do you see how these two sides are really interesting sides to the swing of the pendulum here, is that you're actually quite able to handle both. But the mystic was stronger even than the lover. So what we see in your profile is the sage is the strongest at over 7. So it's a very mature, developed character there at 7. But followed shortly, and just as mystic is about 6.7, 6.8. So that character is just a little behind. So let me unpack then. The way that I would imagine is you go into a new situation, you tend to first of all say, okay, guys, show me the facts, show me what's real. And that you're very much filtering any situation with reality and truth. Effectively, it's like, let's get to the truth here. Let's find out what's real. Part of that could be, let's see the numbers. And then, that is what you're first of all focused in on. But the mystic is interesting that that's the one that's following, because you're also then looking at what can we make of this? So you're not stuck with the sage's view of the past, which is, what have we got to this point, and what's the precedents from history we can be looking at, although it's important. The mystic then comes in and says, yeah, and where are we going with this, and what's the future vision that we should be following? So, but I do see it in that order. Now, these can sometimes shift a little bit. It can be that on a Wednesday morning, because of something that happened the night before, the mystic actually jumps up a little bit. So they do jostle, and these are both very close to each other. So you may find that some days you're a bit more vision orientated, other days you're a bit more analytical and looking at, okay, so let's get real about exactly where we are from a numbers perspective, from what evidence I can bring up to tell me. So those two are kind of the strongest two, but I would suggest that you first of all are saying, give me the facts. Second of all, where are we heading? And what are we going to make of this? Let's imagine something different that isn't actually bound to the facts, but definitely makes reference to them. So it's like, once we've got the facts clear, now where are we going, guys? Let's innovate. Let's imagine something better. Let's say what if, or what could be, and give ourselves a vision and a target to go for. So does that make sense? That's your kind of power profile. Does that make sense about generally how you go into situations or seek to tackle things?
Yeah, no, I think that kind of just hits it on the head, actually. I think an analogy I might use would be a Lego. I think I like to go in and see what the Lego set that we've got is, what the bricks we've got, and then think about what we can build. So to go back to what you're saying, is what are the raw materials? What have we got that we can then start to mold? And I think, yeah, probably there is that kind of taking stock first of all, because you need to know where you are before you can think about what you can do with what you've got to move forward. But yeah, then very quickly just flip into that. Okay, well, that was the past. Let's not worry about it too much. We've now got to think about actually where we go. What are the opportunities from what we've got? What are the challenges that are going to come out of where we are? That's how do we overcome them, but also what are the opportunities and how do we make the best of them?
Yeah, so, yeah. Excellent. That's great. So that's great confirmation of the general side of your kind of primary driver. But following on from that, as soon as you're clear with those two, once those take good solid form, the lover character, which basically it's not just the Romeos and Juliets of the world here. We're talking about a person who cares about people. Very quickly, you're thinking, okay, team, impact on individuals, impact on people. How's this team going to work together? Do we have a team? Are we in harmony and unity here? Or is there, the lover character is very conscious of strife and disharmony, and really hates it and wants to eradicate it, and will move on from it very quickly. And they, so in a positive way, they just want to bring people together. They want to make sure that this is a good working team. They're sensitive to anything that could disrupt that. And then they will, steer and nurture and bring guys together and move forward as a team. So those three are actually your strongest three, which is interesting because you've got a mix there of left brain character and then two right brain characters. So your sage works with reality and facts and resources. You said a clear understanding of resources, but then you get creative. And creative in terms of imagining and vision. So imagination is the domain of the mystic. Yeah. Right. And the lover is in there, still in right brain here, which allows for further creativity and mainly connection, because you know that the good result will come out of connection. Then it swings back over to the next two, which is, again, left brain character. So it's once you've satisfied your creative and your visionary desires and drives, then it's the sovereign steps in and says, right, guys, let's get this thing in order. Let's pull this together. Let's establish the boundaries. Let's get clear on delegating who specifically is doing what, by when, so it's the rule of law effectively that is then built around your project or what's coming up. And then let's go do it. So the warrior then kicks in. So your sovereign's at about 5.5, 5.6, good, strong sovereign, but still subservient to the sage and the facts, the mystic and the imagination, the lover and the connection. And then in comes, right, let's pull this show together, make this machine, get it clear. And then the warrior says, right, start the engine, let's move, let's just get on with it. Only once all of those are satisfied do you allow yourself, and that's rolling on, do you allow yourself, because the jest is just over a 3, will you actually say, hey, we can chill a bit here, have a drink and talk. But it's pretty low down. So you are one of those guys just committed to setting the scene, and then it's progress. And you won't be satisfied unless you're seeing warrior at 4.8 means that even though it's kind of subservient to the other, that just means you want to set the scene and get that in place. You still will not be satisfied unless you're making considerable progress on an hourly, let alone a daily basis. Yeah. It's like, yep, that's moving forward, that's moving forward. And then once you are feeling like that's actually happening, then you will allow the jester to come on in, but he's last on the list. So this would be letting your hair down and all the rest. But this is, when you're interacting with people, the lover character is actually enabling you still to, even though you're working darn hard at these things, even though it's a pretty serious approach from the sage sort of thing, there's still the inspiration of the mystic, which gives people that, just by being around you on the team, they feel inspired because of your mystic qualities. They know that it's based on reality and fact, so they have a confidence in you that you're not just, pie in the sky, head in the clouds sort of thing, which some mystics can be. But they don't need to see a huge amount of that jester, because that lover character is also in there connecting with them, and so they feel connected with whilst they're with you on the team. So fine to have a little bit of the jester in there. It may be that some people on the team go to the jester quicker than you do. So if you're managing a team or directing, just to be aware of that, that they might want to have breaks more often than you would do it yourself. They may want to go out for a drink more often, or let their hair down and do something crazy a bit more often. So this is the one, one of the ones just to watch there. When we see our lowest character, be aware that that's maybe fine for us. That might not need to shift, but when we're dealing with other people, their needs may be different. Equally, though, you may be working alongside somebody who's a warrior at about an 8 or a 9, and they are even more driven than you are, and your job there is to kind of rein them in and make sure that they are serving the vision that the mystic and the sovereign have to kind of together help to put together. Does that sit and make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it does. I think absolutely. I think part of that, I suppose, that level thing is, I think I'd like to think of myself as being sort of collaborative and collegial, particularly from a management point of view. I'm not a sort of dictator, I suppose, but but that's within the parameters, of what we've got to get done. So I think that does resonate, and I think equally, like I said, with the warrior, I've met many a strong warrior type in my time. It's a case of actually like absolutely brilliant in many situations, but actually when they're careering off and left, when actually what the vision is, we need to go right. That's when we need to just take stock and actually think, okay, is this really where we want to be going at this point? But I think that pretty much sums up my prioritizations very well, I think.
Excellent. Good. So it's really fun just to see how these simple 6 characters, they cover off left brain and right brain. They show different areas of motivation and drive inside each one of us. And being aware of it is the first thing. Just self-awareness, I think, is just such a key thing, especially as you mentioned earlier, the rate of change now is extraordinary. And whilst I totally disagree with somebody's conclusion that like AI now is taking us into such a place that humans are no longer going to be center stage, I fully disagree with that. But I do believe that we are going to need to learn to adapt faster than ever. And core to that is understanding who we are and how we tick. Because when you understand these characters, you can also begin to understand how we perform under pressure. Where will you go to when the chips are down? So first of all, if the pressure was on you, I would say the sage would lead, and it's like, no, let's get clear about really what's going on. Let's really get that clarity. Would be a driver for you that this stands, however it is. And then again, the mystics not just like, okay, the numbers are terrible, we're messed, we're sunk. You would actually come in and say, no. I'm sure there's a way. Let's just, what else could we do? What if, etc. And you're then still saying, guys, as a team, we've got to work together on this. Come on, we don't have any crazy outliers. We need to be really working together. So even under pressure, or maybe especially under pressure, these characters will come out in real contrast. I think you'll see them nice and clearly. So as you're looking ahead to your current situation, challenges, as you face, whether it's the world at large and where we're going in society, or whether it's your specific situation, as you look at this profile, do you feel that this to be this way in the world is going to really help you to tackle the sorts of jobs that you're dealing with, the sorts of situations that you're imagining ahead of you, the sorts of people you think you're going to be dealing with? Or would you say that actually, I could see myself shifting this profile to develop it into something different over the coming years?
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? I think I'm at the moment content with that profile as it is. I think taking everything as being relative, I suppose. I think the warrior coming in, fifth out of that list, is whether or not.
I will emphasize, still really quite mature, just a touch under 5, so it's still well developed. If it was under 3, we'd be having a different conversation. But it's still present and correct, but it's not a driver. Action is not your driver. It's kind of subservient to the other 4 that come ahead of it. So just to emphasize that, it's not like there's something that needs fixing here, not in your situation. That's not what people would be paying you for. But interesting. Sorry, I interrupted that line of thought.
No, that's good to know that there's nothing that needs fixing. But I think there may well be, particularly being candid. If I'm out there now as a force of one, rather than with a massive corporation behind me, whether or not that is an area that I need to think about, to actually get a point across, without actually necessarily having a massive corporate structure, having my back kind of thing, or having presence or status. I came from a company where I built up status, and in a meeting, not all the time, but when I spoke, people listened, kind of thing. So I think that might be a case that actually, whether or not I need to think about where that sits and how I get my point across. So the relying on the lover is, and you correct me if wrong, is probably something that develops over time with the team that you're working with. You get to know them, you get to get their chemistries, their anthropology, that the whole kind of way that the team works. But actually, sometimes if actually time does not allow that, maybe the warrior does need to come to the fore a bit more and actually saying, well, yes, it will be very nice to do this, but actually we've just got to get this done now. So, because I might not have 2 years to get a change program done or something, it might actually be in the time of the essence kind of thing. So I think that'd be interesting to see how that plays out. I think the balance of the sage and the mystic, though, I think are still valid. I think looking forward, as I said, looking at assessing the challenges and the obstacles for a business, be it an individual, be it a startup, be it a global corporation, is as relevant going forward as it is historically. But also being able to flex that vision, seeing a vision and making it happen and making it real, I think is what the two bits that I want to be able to bring going forward. So I'm glad that they are where they are, and I'm not going to mess with that personality chemistry, I don't think.
Yeah, excellent. So your point on the warrior is a really interesting one. And especially as people do then break out on their own and seek to establish their own thing, that warrior is one of those characters that needs to be there to set certain things in place. And I've found some other people in the past can spend a bit too long overthinking and not enough action. The sage has to sort of allow the warrior to be nurtured and given a bit more room sometimes, because the sage needs to understand the lesson that only by doing will you really learn. To know and not to do is not truly to know. And so the warrior does have to be involved in the learning process. You can't forever be looking at your data to make a decision. You can start there, no problem with that being an approach, but it's really only by the doing. The other thing is that the warrior and the lover are actually both kind of connected by a common modus operandi of passion. Yeah, so the passion it's the drive for the lover to connect with people, whereas for the warrior, it's the force necessary to force through the job that needs to be done. So the lover's passion is generally known as compassion, whereas for the warrior, it's just throw your energy. It's energy for both of them, but it comes over in a slightly different way. The thought that was just coming to mind as you're talking through that is your slight hint of concern about, okay, if I did raise the warrior, I think I probably need to, but I guess people won't feel quite so connected if I do that, because the lover's kind of naturally going to come down if I force the warrior up. It's probably a very sage way of looking at the situation. And actually, I think that the lover being as strong as it is, you probably will have set the scene and created that connection a lot more than you realize you have. Because you're probably potentially over-analyzing that, and you can quickly restore that with you just think, what does that person need to hear right now? If you sense that that's happening, you can just ask yourself that question. What do I feel that person needs? That's where the empathy comes in. The warrior doesn't have that empathy in their pure form, in their raw form. They don't have the empathy. It's like, get out of my way, I've got a mission to deal with. Not come and join me, I've got a mission to deal with. They may start with that, but generally if you're not with them, it's like, well, stuff you then. I'm just going to do it. That's where the warrior will go under pressure. It's like, I'm going to do it, even if I have to do it alone, But there's enough of that lover character for you to do that, reach out, have the empathy, engage with them. And sometimes to say, look, I know that you won't feel like all your needs are being met right now. The fact that you've elevated that, brought that up, spotlighted it, is actually sometimes enough. So the person says, yeah, I don't. You said, well, okay, I acknowledge that. And what's crucial for us to succeed at all here, all this whole thing falls apart, is that we do. And then sometimes, like a surgeon knows, taking action is sometimes the most loving thing, even if it involves getting out the scalpel. You're an editor, you know that. You've been scalpeling people's work for years.
Fair point. No, it's really interesting actually. Yeah, the idea that actually that empathy and how much of that is actually unrecognized while you're in the moment, but actually I suppose it is building up. It is amassing. So no, I'll bear in mind.
Interesting stuff. So interesting, yeah, and this is a great exercise sometimes, just to say, okay, take 5 minutes, look at this, say what would happen if, as I approach this situation, what would happen if that warrior was 2 whole degrees higher? What if it was a 7 on the par with the sage? Which is like, I get an idea, I action it. What would happen if that was the case? And sometimes I think that is what's required here. Is that to deal with a situation, that's really what's necessary, is to look at a shift. And because you've got a good level of maturity right the way across the board here, it means that you can go to whatever part is necessary. It's not like you use, oh, and I can't do that people person thing, so I that level, I'm just gonna have to give that thing to somebody else. You're able to go there, you're able to take whatever action is necessary there. Maybe a little bit less so with the jester, so you might want to delegate the team building social activities to somebody who's a bit more like, yeah, this would be exciting. To you it's like, well, yeah, okay, once the other things are done, fellas.
yeah
So, if that makes some sense
on
there.
the money. Yeah.
All good. So look, I don't know, has that been an interesting conversation around this?
Yeah, really. The colour in the picture, I think, has been very interesting. So thank you very much for that. And especially so I guess I got the 2 main pulleys, but to see the balance of the others and how they can all interact, I think was really interesting and really useful. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Fascinating. Yeah. And this is where a lot of people will look at this and say, actually, that's just a confirmation. I like the way I do life, actually, and it just confirms what's really driving that. And it just gives me a bit more insight in. But yeah, I'm good. I'm just going to keep going in the way that I am now. And at the same time, it does give them an awareness of when other people then start interacting with them. They start going, I know they're being sage. I think they're being a bit too sage here. It's like, we need to balance that. It's like, that's a useful contribution.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. But we also need to consider this view and this view. But you then have the ability to language that in such a way that you can help them to find their most productive place in the whole team, that they feel valued, they feel respected. So it's very important from a team perspective to look at the differences that are there, reaffirm, first of all, it's self-awareness, bring that to the team. Second of all, it's then seeing how we can respect each other's differences and how we can then bring that together to make a better solution. Sometimes we need to hire in a bit of extra, lover, because there's not enough of that team cohesion or whatever, or a bit more warrior if we aren't really taking the action that we need to. And if we feel some tensions in somebody else's approach, well, this explains kind of down to the core the reasons for that, and helps us to see it from this framework. Okay, then it makes a lot more sense why I'm finding this difficult and why this person's finding this person difficult, and gives an explanation that actually shows it's not that something's wrong. It's not wrong. It's just awareness of the different perspectives. So
certainly with the sage, and we've all known characters where the sage and the warrior, as you touched on just now, are the 2 main ones, and you see them, that's the idea. Let's just go and do it. And and absolutely, there's absolute strength. There's a place for that. But to actually know what's going on there and actually where the right place for that kind of behaviour is for example, is invaluable. So
yeah, and I think that's the sort of thing that as a manager of any situation or as a leader, you can say, look, we're going to introduce, we've got this session with this particular client or company. So look, I'm going to start with this. Now, I know you're going to want to do, and this is where you plug in, acknowledge, but also kind of defuse, or at least keep them in their stall for the right time. I know you're going to want to do X, Y, and Z. I'd rather for this meeting leave X out of it, but at 20 minutes in, you can do Y and Z. And that's where I really want you to shine with this. But let's keep X off the table just for now, because I think actually they're not quite ready for it.
Yeah.
And you see, it then gives them, okay, that's my time in the spotlight then, and I can really be me. And you say, I really want you to be fully you in this situation here, and push this through, or whatever it might be. And that sort of management is just a framework that really helps that sort of thing. So your power profile was there with Sage and with Mystic. We could see how that was driving you, but it's always important then just to look at where the other characters are to get that full archetype spectrum, that full picture of profile, to understand really what makes you tick kind of across the board, and all those thinking styles and where they sit, so that we can understand ourselves better. But then as we get to know other people, then we can really begin to understand the way they think, not so much what they're thinking, but the way that they're thinking, the way they're approaching things. And then being able to use their language to meet all of those points is so effective when you're seeking to influence and steer and gain greater impact. So fascinating, wonderful to talk this through with you. We're out of time, but been great to do that. And I'm sure we'll be following up in different ways in the future, but you've seen how to unpack this, and I'll be keeping an eye on you and seeing where you head in the following years. Great to talk to you so much. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So there you have an insider's view of one of these signature impact consultations, where we understand all 6 archetypes and how they're impacting somebody's life, and how a shift and a change there could seriously help them to move significantly further forward in their chosen field. These archetype profiles will enable you to zero in on the specific character traits that you need to develop, or at least become aware of, in order to move forward without hindrances, without feeling stuck. This is where we diagnose and discover the hidden code to your unique personal strengths, the next step to your path to purpose and to profit. So I really do encourage you now to book your session with me online. teamme.com/impact gives you the details and the link. So go there now, book your session with me, and we will have an amazing time of unpacking who you really are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and defining a path to go forward, as well as giving you some of the tools there and then that you can pick up and utilize to create your signature impact.